So I'm going to talk today about online digital analytics. So the nice thing about these platforms is you don't need any software to run things. You can just log into a website and run some analytics. I imagine for most of this audience, you would be more developers for the kinds of workflows that we can produce and make available to the masses. And you might be curious about some of the stuff that underlies all of this. But a lot of these are sort of point and click dashboards, which are probably, of more use to people who aren't used to coding or simulating in a coding environment. But anyway, I'm Rob. I'm an old ornithologist, and Elisa is the program manager of EcoCommons. And so this is just, some slides that both of us have put together over the years. And let's see, we'll get started. So I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting and pay my respect to the elders past and present. As an ecologist, I recognize that, Aboriginal folks are probably Australia's first ecologists. And it's really nice to see that sort of recognized increasingly in recent times. And I need to start out by saying that we're really lucky at both Biosecurity Commons and EcoCommons in that we're sitting on top of this immense foundation. And the foundation is made of three parts. It's kind of digital infrastructure, so the servers and all the know-how to make this work online. There's data, so a lot of data suppliers that help us out. And then there's these centers of excellence or research institutions that we're affiliated with that drive the workflows that we make available online. So everything we do is possible because we rest on top of this huge foundation of stuff. And the vision at EcoCommons is pretty huge. It's this idea that we can develop a place where Australian practitioners and researchers can use trusted, world-leading ecological and environmental modeling tools to protect and restore the planet. So that's a huge vision. We got a long way to go before we hit that vision, but it's a great reason to get up out of bed in the morning. It's a nice place to be pointed towards. And essentially, we provide this analytics platform. And on the analytics platform, you can launch a modest little Jupyter environment where you can run code in R or Python. If you want a more rigorous Jupyter environment, you could launch that with ARDC. But the one we have is probably pretty good if you're teaching and you want everybody to be using the same sort of dependencies and stuff all installed and all that, so you don't have to fight with that. We also offer a lot of point and click dashboards that allow you to run analytics online, and it's extendable. So it's very easy to add new workflows to the digital infrastructure that we provide, and you can spin up the analytics in other places. So it's very flexible architecture that it's built upon, all reliant to get on access to good data, and all kinds of different people are using the tools. So scientists, students, educators, and government. Certainly a lot of the EcoCommons tools are really popular with educators, classroom instruction on modeling and that kind of stuff. And we're really interested in sort of building digital literacy skills, of students and others. So we do teach coding and other things like that. We also make it very easy to find data. So make it, it's easy to find stuff and examples of how to do modeling. So we have a lot of that kind of material, a lot of theoretical, kind of almost mini lectures that are available online. And I think where this kind of tool becomes a game changer is in its capacity to share your analytics with other researchers and other people, other departments, whatever it might be. So just like sharing data is a powerful idea, sharing analytics is a powerful idea, because when you share your analytics, the whole package, you're sharing your curated data, you're sharing all the assumptions that went into that workflow, you're sharing the code. So it's all reproducible, and you can share your results. And the more eyes that look into a workflow, the higher quality outputs you're likely to get. So I think we're moving towards this space where, hopefully we'll have peer reviewed of analytics, right, at some point. But it's the idea where we can begin to share analytics and have more eyes on things, which I think is a powerful idea. And being affiliated, so I started on the EcoCommons team, and it was a bit like being in a startup. It was really exciting. We're having all these conversations with all these people about all this different stuff that you can do with online tools and analytics. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of examples of the kinds of collaborations that we've been having over the last couple of years. And here, I just want you to focus on this detection probability curve, right? So a lot of us are familiar with that. And oftentimes, we just don't have the resource to go out 10 or 20 times to get near perfect detection of the critter that we might be looking for, right? So oftentimes we have imperfect detection probability, so our zeros aren't very accurate in our data, which makes it harder to model where they occur. And what's exciting is there's all these different tools that are coming online. It's almost like when satellites started, delivering all this remote sensing data, we're getting camera trap data, we're getting sort of this eDNA data. And in this case, we were working with QUT on their acoustic monitoring data sets. And QUT has put together some tremendous sort of workflows that apply machine learning to pull apart, to build a recognizer so you can pull out species occurrence data from a recording that's made on a small device strapped to a tree, right? So we're experiencing sort of this huge growth in data availability. So Google Analytics, the Microsoft Planetary Computer, Eratos was another group that we were talking to, are putting together these really high resolution climate data sets, allow you to downscale in all kinds of different ways. You can build your own tools with them, create custom tools to create climate data that is, fit for purpose kind of stuff. So a lot of exciting things that are happening in that space. And, this is a cliche almost with you guys, I imagine, but all models are wrong and some are useful is absolutely true. But again, the sharing of models and the sharing of data really becomes a game changer. And the other reason I'm excited about working in this space now is this idea of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible data, right? So fair data, but also fair workflows. So if I'm a PhD student, I got 3 years to do a PhD. Well, I've got 45,000 papers that I can draw from on a mallard. But if I'm interested in looking at a threatened species like the yellow-bellied glider, there's a couple thousand papers, right? There's not near the foundation of knowledge. The more papers there are, the more interesting questions you can ask. And it's the same kind of thing with analytics. We've got over 5 million SDM results in the literature. But for GDM, there's only 22,000, relatively small amount. And for some workflows, they're really cool, but they haven't seen the light of day, so they're not being used. So sharing analytics, I think, is a powerful idea. So if there's 5 million SDM papers, why in the world do we need SDMs to be even more readily available online, right? That's a question we get a lot. And it's because there's this huge demand to understand where things are on the planet. And the assumptions that drive your SDM are almost never met. The assumptions are that I have random and representative sampling, almost never. I have perfect detection probability, almost never. So there's all kinds of things you can do in the analytical space to meet that demand, to sort of increase your capacity to deal with imperfect data. But again, sharing and collaborating. The more you do that, I think the more you're likely to answer those questions more quickly. And again, we're lucky at EcoCommons in that we've got, so BCCBL was the precursor to EcoCommons, started in 2014. So they've been developing SDMs and predicting those, how a species distribution is going to change in the future for a very long time. And so we're drawing on all of that expertise at EcoCommons and at Biosecurity Commons. And there's all kinds of other things you can use SDMs for. This is just a powerful way to communicate potential impacts of climate change, for example. Maps are very intuitive. Here we're looking at the North Pole, and this is the sort of predicted suitable climatic niche of a Pacific golden plover. So this Pacific golden plover migrates to Australia each year and then nests up here in Siberia and Alaska. Worst case scenario under climate change, that climatic niche almost entirely disappears, right? It's a good communication tool. I can say, look, this cute little bird is going to have to adapt to an entirely different place, an entirely different climatic niche in the future if it's going to survive. So SDMs, well, I mean, they're, on one level, they're very simple. We've got species data, we've got environmental data, we've got an algorithm. We chew those things up and we get a prediction of where things are going to occur. But I'm going to, let's see, switch over to just show you some of the stuff that we have online. So just kind of do a bit of a demo real quick. So this is our website at EcoCommons. You can get in touch with us if you want to log in. You can also, there's a lot of support material. So there's a bunch of use cases that are available. We've got on GitHub a bunch of, the example data and whatnot to reproduce these results that are available. So it's a good place to jump in. There's a lot of lecturers who are drawing on some of that material. We also have, stacks of videos and that kind of thing that kind of make short, there's a series of videos on sort of the theory of species distribution modeling, or how to do it in R, or how to get started with R. So all kinds of different things that you can draw on. We also have a whole bunch of support material, and this is really popular when lecturers give a lecture. There's a whole bunch of stuff that the students can dig into to get more detail on. For example, this is just an overview of Maxent, which is, the most popular SDM around. And it just, walks you through, kind of what it's doing, kind of some of the theory, and also, how you can tweak the model arguments within the platform. So all those different model arguments that you can play with on the platform are kind of spelled out for you. And so this is the platform itself. Once you log in, we've got close to 350 terrestrial data sets that are available, kind of plug and play. You can view those data sets. You can also just grab the URL if you wanted to and plug it into your coding environment. So grab it. So there's an API connection to our object store, and you could just grab the data and play with it that way. If you get rid of, so if you allow for monthly data and include future climate data, we've got almost 60,000 plug and play data sets that are available within EcoCommons that you can kind of play with. So there's a huge wealth of climate data in here, depending on if you're a pessimist or an optimist, different emission scenarios, different global circulation models, all kinds of stuff. CSIRO also has this data scraping tool. So it scrapes the web to look for data. And there's over 80,000 data sets that are indexed in this. So you can sort of just type a digital elevation model. And you can figure out, so this isn't plug and play data, but you could download it. So you can find data quite easily. And you can even go to, well, I want the URL to bring that into Python or into R, whatever it might be. So lots of ways to find data. And also there's ways to sort of import data. So we've got, let's see, we've got API connections to, for example, the Atlas of Living Australia. So if I were to look for one of my favorite birds, you can import all the powerful owl records if you want to, and you can mint a DOI. And the reason you'd want to do that is because you can apply all these filters. So you can sort of say, oh, I only want the last few years of data. I only want data that's really precise, whatever it might be, and then mint a DOI, and then your friend can use that DOI to get the same set of data. So then you hit import and it shows up in your data sets. So if we go back to the data sets tab, you've got my data sets. So those are data sets that you've either uploaded. So you can also upload data. And you can, or the ones that come in through API connections show up here. And you can also then delete those data, download them, and you can download any of the data sets unless there's some kind of restriction on them. And you can share those data. So you can send them to somebody else who has an account on EcoCommons or Biosecurity Commons and share those data. And this is an SDM workflow. So we might go to the, we might go here to the analysis hub. So these are different things. This is your Jupyter environment where you can do some coding if you want to log in there. Biosecurity risk mapping is here. And then these are some dashboard tools for analytics. You can run species distribution modeling. You can do that. You can batch those SDMs across multiple species. The migratory should be available soon. You can do some fairly simple things with species trait modeling, kind of predicting how a trait varies spatially. Once you've run a few species distribution models, you can then make climate change predictions based on those, and you can do an ensemble analysis, but ours is just a simple average. So it's, but a lot of options in there. And this is an example of how we run an SDM. So we just give it a name, pop in some occurrence data. This was for a biosecurity example, actually, but you can visualize your occurrence records. So we're training an SDM based on the native range of this mouse-eared hawkweed, which is an invasive alpine flower. And you can choose different ways to deal with absence, your absence locations or pseudo absence locations. We have profile models, so you don't always need pseudo absence locations. You can upload absence data if you have it. Most people don't. We'll have bias or targeted background data that we'll be able to add soon. And then all of those data sets that I was highlighting, you can select any of those thousands of data sets and use those as predictors in your model. You can visualize those as you've added them. You can use a convex hull around it, which is, I think, what we did here. Yep, so this is a convex hull. So that's where we're going to train our model. But you could do all of the other kinds of things. You could pick a state or an NRM boundary or whatever it might be. And then just like all the things that would show up in an R package for species distribution modeling show up here. So you can tweak all those model arguments to your heart's content and just run the model. So fairly simple to do these things. And the results you get a map that you can, so this is, again, I think, yeah, this is still the mouse-eared hawkweed. So that's a prediction of where it occurs across the globe, and you get all the usual things, around sensitivity and specificity, ROC plots, or you should have some response curves. You can download your absence data or your pseudo absence data or whatever it might be. And you can also download the R script that generates this. So there's a lot of things that you can do within the platform. So that's a very quick overview of one of the functionalities that's currently available within within EcoCommons. And then I was just going to touch on some of the things that we'd like to do going forward. So, if you read this paper by Zarel, it's a great conceptual paper of, all the kinds of different things that you want to think about when you're doing an STM. And I think we've got about a third of them on the platform. So there's lots more we could do, right, in this space. And one of the things that we started playing with was, so we have a migratory modeling experiment that we're trying to put online soon. And so we teamed up with folks at AODN who have a bunch of marine data. And we said, well, can we predict the seasonal movement patterns of fish based on your tag data that you have? And we put together a bias layer. So this is where there's these buoys that go ping every time a fish with a tag swims by. And, we generated some seasonal predictions of how the yellowtail kingfish in this particular example is moving seasonally across throughout the ocean. And this kind of simulation opens up, thinking around, well, we can actually put marine reserves around areas or fishing restrictions in areas when the fish are there. So it doesn't have to be a permanent reserve kind of thing. And again, that's only possible because people like IMOS and AODN have put all the data together, and we can draw from it and play with it. And we've done a similar exercise with Ratos. So they have a lot of climate data, and they have all of BOM's time series data that's been rasterized, and it's very easy to access through them. And we're trying to get that, but this is the same kind of caper, right? So we're predicting how things, how the channel-billed cuckoo, which is a migratory cuckoo, comes in and out of Australia. One of the things we really got to get better at is dealing with bias in our sampling data. I mean, that's why there's so many, that's why we're still working on STMs. And this is a map of, this is all the records that I can find in any database of birds, any bird. And a black area is a place where I could go and be a pioneer and do a survey and enter it in a database, and I'd be the first one to do it. But all the bird records are around Brizzy and, Townsville, Cairns, as you'd expect. So this is our study area in Brisbane. And if I'm going to ask a naive question of the data, no surprise to this audience, but if I say, I want to put several $1 million into places where there's the most threatened species, given your available data on private land, guess where all the threatened species on private land occur? Well, they all occur in Brisbane. And so, I mean, clearly, you guys know this, but it's dealing with all this black space out here is the trick, right? And so we took that study area and we took all the data available for powerful owl. We took all the data available just in breeding sites. And then we said, well, what if all of our acoustic monitoring data turned up owls? And that's what this is. And then we take some environmental predictors, and when we use a bias layer, hey, we get a different result. When we use all the records, we get a different result. When we use a digital elevation model, which is poorly represented in our data, in our sampling, we get a different result. And if we deal with bias in a different way, we get a different result. What's interesting about the species distribution literature, you always get a confidence interval around, a regression or whatever it might be, but we rarely do that spatially. So this is just a quick, so if I have breeding hollow data, that's a much narrower niche, and I get much better predictions. But I get very different predictions if all those places where we haven't had records before are actually breeding owls. Like I get big changes based on available data, and much poorer result if I'm considering just anywhere a powerful owl might turn up as opposed to places where they breed, right? So all things that are kind of intuitive. But what if we take a map, and this is the darker the area, the less geographic sampling we have for birds. Those lighter areas are places where we have lots of data. We do the same thing with environmental space. So the environmental space is really well represented in these urban areas, but not as well represented in other places. We do a statistical union on those two levels of uncertainty. When we bring those together, all of a sudden we can start to, so we got the suitability on our y-axis. So that's saying, oh yeah, that's usually what we're used to looking at in an SDM result. But as we go more gray or black, those are all the places where our uncertainty is really high in our results. And so these are the kinds of ideas that we're playing with. There's all kinds of ways that you could represent this uncertainty, this x-axis. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that we're playing with. We could also get better at telling users how good their data is. Systematic data gives you better results. And we could get better at being able to throw independent data at our predictions to look at the sensitivity and specificity from independent data as opposed to the training data, which is mostly what we're doing now. So lots of room for work within EcoCommons. And also we're playing with the idea of putting together a bunch of sort of geoprocessing toolboxes to make it easier to change your CRS, on the fly, resample, reclassify, mask, run things like neighborhood functions across your data. So those kinds of functionality are things that we're looking to do over the next year or two. And all of this is sort of resting on this huge tech stack. And, so there's servers, there's Slurm that sort of partitions your clusters. There's Nextflow, there's Kubernetes, there's all this stuff that, and a bunch of engineers who work on this huge code base that represents the tech stack. But because EcoCommons already existed, at Biosecurity Commons, we're able to build some workflows and some dashboard tools for much less money because we're just able to leverage that tech stack. So 1.8 million versus 5 million to do that. And so Biosecurity Commons is the project that I've moved over to. We've got these growing biosecurity threats related to climate and globalization, things that, Australia has this great little island that went off in its own direction in terms of ecology and evolution. And when these foreign pests come in, they really create havoc. So things like myrtle rust and cane toads, but things like varroa mites that are plaguing some of the bee colonies around New South Wales, foot and mouth disease, yellow crazy ants. Some of these things can have huge impacts to industry as well. So we've built this Biosecurity Commons platform to sort of, let's see if I can get out of this. Right. So if we go to the Biosecurity Commons platform, it's a similar kind of a thing. And if you wanted to get, for example, you could contact us or look at news and events. So we've got the website up and running. But we've got different workflows. So we borrow the species distribution modeling workflow from EcoCommons. So we're using the exact same stuff, which tells us where a pest or disease might be. But then we have a risk mapping workflow, which is kind of looking at propagule pressure as well and looking at where is a pest most likely to establish within Australia. We have dispersal modeling, which is really, I think this is really exciting for someone like me who, I do some coding, but I'm not a gun coder. Some of the tools that this guy from the University of Melbourne has put together allow you to really, in an easy to use environment, start playing with how populations could spread and how their numbers might change as they spread. And this opens the door to things like spatial population viability analysis, all kinds of different things that you can play with that Sean's kind of put together. So I think having this kind of workflow available to a broader suite of users really opens the door to, again, a lot more use of a new workflow that hasn't been used as much as maybe it could. Surveillance design. So this is where would we look for a pest or a disease to be most likely to detect it. how can we make sure we've done enough survey effort to prove whether it's there or not? And sometimes that's really important for industry. So we've got a bunch of workflows that are available. We also have one that's coming probably tomorrow or the next day on impact analysis, which looks at what's the economic or ecological impact of a pest or a disease arriving in a place. And we have ways that people can build layers to value layers, asset value layers, and they intersect with where the species might occur to give an overall indication of impact. Anyway, I think one of the things I wanted to show you that, is one of the little clever tricks that I thought you guys might appreciate, that this guy, Sean Haythorne at SEBRA at the University of Melbourne has put together. So one of the challenging things you have to deal with when you're, and this is just a small little region here that we're modeling. But if you're doing a dispersal model, or if you're looking at spread, oftentimes you're having to pull into memory the likelihood of of the pest going to any individual cell, right, across your study area. So you're dealing with a lot of data. And one of the tricks that he's used to be able to facilitate this kind of spread modeling without using as much compute is this idea that, okay, we're going to only calculate each individual cell value for this, this area right around where we're initializing the model, where we're starting. And then as we go further away, the cell sizes are going to grow to 5 times the scale, or maybe 100 times the scale. Whatever it is, you can play with those parameters, but all of a sudden you get this, you can start playing with the models at kind of coarser resolution to get a sense of, how well they're working before you hit it with the really fine resolution stuff to work. So that's just he's done a lot of clever things like that, which is nice. And all of his code is available on GitHub, or all the SEBRA stuff is there as well. And, so you've got kernel dispersal model that you can build, so you can define your kernel with different distributions and wind and distance kernels. You can do all kinds of different things. You can add attractors and permeability layers. You can do, you can just run simple diffusion model or a gravity model. So lots and lots of different kind of cool things that he's put together. And you can also use a presence only model. So it's there, it's not, but you can also use an unstructured or a stage structured population model to sort of look at your probabilities of how many critters are in your cell and how many are likely to be there at the next time step. So just some really interesting tools that he's put together. And then you can run it for as many replicates as you need. And, you might want to run it for 5 time steps, which is what we did here. You can define how the time steps, how long, what's the units, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stuff to talk about that I don't have time to talk about. But, you get, so this was replicating a dispersal model that was in the literature, looking at wind dispersal of the orange hawkweed, which was planted near Falls Creek. This is showing after 5 years, the likelihood of it going at different distances. And that then feeds into, well, okay, we understand where it might go based on wind in 5 years' time. How do we allocate resources to that? And there's an optimization model that sort of digs into that. So there's a lot of tools that are available that haven't seen the light of day that are coming online in Biosecurity Commons. And that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping to see more of, in the future, I guess. And I might just take you real quickly through a risk mapping workflow. So this is a result. on a log scale so you can actually visualize things. But this is your established pest establishment likelihood. So this is where do we think mouse-eared hawkweed, so it's another little flower in the alpine area, where is it likely to arrive and be viable in Australia? And this is the result we get. The maths behind this is really simple. We're just multiplying abiotic suitability by biotic suitability by our propagule pressure. And the nice thing about this tool is not that we can multiply three things together, but we can build, we can define the pathway that it's going to come in on, and get an estimate of the relative probability that it's going to arrive through the mail, for example. So, and we have to put it on the log scale because these numbers are quite small, but not surprisingly, we're predicting that it's going to occur where the seeds are going to arrive in the mail where people live, right? So that's the kind of result you get. But you sort of stack all these different pathways that those seeds might arrive, and you can construct these within the platform. And then you just do a statistical union on these different pathways to get your pest arrival likelihood, which again is just multiplied by your biotic suitability and your abiotic suitability, and the abiotic's often a climatic niche model. Anyway, I felt I kind of zipped through a lot of material, so I don't know if I can keep rambling on about different workflows, but yeah, exactly. But I don't know if anybody has any questions. I can dig into those. I think one of the nice things about this is here you can, I can share this project, and so these projects, the ones that are built in the biosecurity space, are built with the idea that a lot of people from a team would be working on putting different pieces of this puzzle together. And so you could share it with everybody on that team. And as they're sharing, you're kind of building it together. And then you can export any of these results. So if I go to pest establishment likelihood, I just say export my results. These are all the results that were exported. And then if I go back into my results, let's see if we go here and we go to my results. So a lot of these are STMs and things, but here's a result from a risk map. So that's the pest establishment likelihood. And any one of those components. So if I have a tourist pathway that I really love, I can pop it into my results and use it in other workflows is kind of the idea. And pull it back into other things. So there's a lot of an ability to sort of share, and then you can also rerun things. So so that's our result there. And let's see if I go to the workspace and I go to my results, and you can do the same kind of thing here. Oh, let's see. There we go. So if I were to run, I've got an ensemble result here. Let's do a different one, actually. We'll do this one. So I could rerun that result. So I could open it back up, change some parameters, add some new data, rerun it. But I could also share it with anybody else who has access to the platform. So anyway, that's
Hey Rob, will you just press the rerun button? Does it bring back basically the configuration scheme that you use, does it?
Yeah, so it just takes you back to that same UI that you were at. So I just hit rerun there, and it brings you back to that workflow. And it does that for any of the results that you're generating. So you can then go, oh, I should have run a range bagging, which is, kind of bootstrapping environmental space, which is kind of a cool algorithm. It works pretty well. Climatch, which is a biosecurity domain specific thing, but it's just an environmental envelope. Anyway. Yep. I feel like I've rambled a lot very quickly. Do you guys have any questions or?
Thanks, Rob. Does anyone have any questions?
No, but I have some claps to start with. That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the really cool thing about being on this project is I'm surrounded by a lot of very clever people. So yeah, some really clever people doing the coding and putting together this stuff, you know, in the digital online environment. So it's a fun space.
Yeah, it's an awesome update since well, the BCCVL, however you used to pronounce it, since I last saw an update of that platform, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's awesome improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. And we still have a long way to go. Like the wish list is unending, right? How long is a piece of string? But yeah, really excited about some of these biosecurity workflows just because a lot of people haven't played with some of those kinds of tools yet. Some, you know, the clever optimization tools, and, you know, you can optimize on budget or on, you know, detection probability or other things. So it's, yeah. Anyway, some cool tools.
Rob, what about feedback? So you used it to deploy people into the field to do some detection. What's the value in bringing back an observation where you found an observation in a low probability area versus finding an observation in a high probability area? How do we handle that? There's different value, isn't there, in those two observations? Finding one in the high value is like no shit. Finding one in the low value area, though, means you need to do something differently or sample or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the exciting thing about this space is the fact that, okay, I came up with a prediction of where this thing should be, right? And, oh, guess what? I got some new data this year. And I can throw that back at these models and go, yeah, we totally missed the mark here. The exciting thing about sharing these analytics online is not that, you know, not the work product itself, but it's the ability to learn when you got it right and learn when you got it wrong. And so over time, as you have more curated data sets and more curated workflows available, you know, the cream will rise to the top, right? I mean, you'll get these models that, hey, this one's working all the time and this one's never working, right? And that happens much more quickly if it's more people playing with the tools.
Ben?
Wow. Amazing amount of work here to get to this stage, and especially making it all available through a web interface. So yeah, definitely hats off. I guess I was just kind of curious about a maybe even a bigger picture question of well, once you have all these SDMs, you could cobble it together maybe and then get it some diversity metrics. But you know, where do SDMs live? And is there like a blessed, you used the phrase the best, the cream of the crop will rise. But then where do I find, like, ideally what I want is, I just want to say, like, for this place on Earth, what's the best set of data that says here's what lives there and here's how much of it lives there? And that's like phenomenally, surprisingly not readily available in marine terrestrial environments in the ways that you'd like. And you would hope that the best available SDMs would then inform that stack. So I'm just kind of curious, what I'm sure you've thought of this. So yeah,
certainly part of the vision, right? Is the idea, and there's some, you know, there's a couple of diversity tools. You know, you can feed this into GDM kind of modeling as well. But this idea that you have this living space where you can continually improve on things is something that we really want to try and get the jurisdictions and the Commonwealth excited about, because you know, there's thousands of people running SDMs in New South Wales alone, and they are not finding the cream on the crop. They're just running the wheel again each time. And so if we can start to share those things and allow the cream, but it's a matter of convincing those 1,000 people in New South Wales that are doing SDMs all the time for a variety of reasons to start sharing them and start giving feedback and going, oh no, you're right, Jim's is better than mine, so I'm going to go with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question if there isn't another one ready. In the first year of the Neon Ecological Forecasting Initiative challenge in America, one of the challenges was predicting mosquito outbreaks for the whole public health issue. And we've had some outbreaks here in Australia, like Ross River virus and so on, mosquito-borne viruses. How difficult or easy do you think it would be to use your system to predict those kinds of outbreaks?
You could have a crack at it for sure, but I mean, what's nice about it is you can have a crack at it quite easily, and then gauge what you get out the end. It all depends on the quality of the data going in, of course. A lot of the very bespoke questions are still going to be, a lot of times you'll still want to dig into the code and, do some extra steps and that kind of thing. But over time in that coding environment, we also want to start sharing those bespoke result, code bases. So scripts, basically, to start seeing people sharing scripts that worked for them more readily. But certainly you could have a crack at a mosquito prediction of where they might occur. BRTs are there. They usually work fairly well. We don't have the tuning that you might want to do in BRTs typically, but you could definitely get started.
Thank you.
Yep.
Linda?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. There was a lot in there, and I missed, I think, critical bits. I was really impressed with the fish moving around in particular, but I wasn't quite sure what they were moving around in response to. My question is actually about the climate data and the weather data that you have in there. Yep. Do you have access, can you actually do anything in terms of forecasting or prediction with respect to interannual variability, or are the climate surfaces kind of mean climate surfaces? So you're just kind of looking at seasonal variation, but not this year. This year there would have been a huge drought, so we would have lost speed. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not asking this question very well, but really, what's the climate data in there?
So it's fairly rich in that there's a lot of temporal variation in the climate data that's available. So the predictions in different time periods. We've got a bunch of monthly summary kind of data that's available. A lot of different emission scenarios applied to future predictions. And sort of, a lot of different GCMs that are also available online. So it's a fairly rich suite of data, but in terms of there's always room for more kind of thing. And what's nice is that you can turn a different layer into a GeoTIFF and upload it and use it in the platform. So if you don't find a resolution that you're happy with, or the precise, weather variables that you want, you can upload your own stuff from somewhere else, which is handy, especially with all the boom of data that's around.
Now, if you wanted to do an analysis, for example, which looked at the impact of 2019 drought year on presence, are you actually able to go, okay, I have all these presence data for this decade, and I also have the climate data for each matching year, so I can find out whether these things come and go at, during, they disappear in 2019, they come back again.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that you can play with in the migratory modeling experiment. That's not available in the dashboard tools, but it's kind of what. So for the fish example, for example, so you're taking a time series, and it could be any time. Like the time period doesn't matter. It can be daily, monthly, annual, or monthly for 10 years, whatever it is. And then if you have occurrence data that you can then extract all of the predictor variables from that suite of time and space, you pull it into that one model, build the model, and then spit it all out across time again. You could do any time, you could do any space, right, with that kind of scenario. And we'll be restricted in data availability in terms of what we have readily available on the platform. But certainly 60,000 data sets is a fair place to start. But yeah, there's a lot more out there.
Sorry?
Thanks.
Yep.
Are there any more questions, or do you have any final comments, Rob?
Yeah, nothing from me. It's just, thanks for having me. I know you guys do a lot of clever work, and I guess just keeping in mind that, ARDC or other places can, take rigorous workflows that maybe you've developed and kind of share them with the public in this way, right? And the utility of that is all of a sudden you can take, your favorite pet workflow and get a lot of people trying a maybe less rigorous version than the coded version that you use, but at least get them familiar with thinking about, a different modeling method. So,
Alistair?
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, I just picking up on Belinda's question about time varying projection, and having just lost my sound briefly when you might have said that. I've got a seasonal forecast physical model that spits me out layers. Can I input those layers as physical layers in an experiment workflow?
So what format are the physical layers in?
Whatever you like. Gridded data, basically.
Yeah, basically you can throw anything at it you want to. In terms of so right now we're kind of restricted in, it has to be a GeoTIFF where the CRS extent and resolution is defined, but
Yep. Beauty.
And
plenty playing around. I've sent my registration request in. It hasn't come back to me yet.
Okay. That
must be because you're here, is it?
We have somebody else who should be able to look after that. But and do keep in mind that we're on the Nectar cloud, right? Which is the public research cloud. So it's not going to be. So you could throw enough at it to slow it down or grind it right to a halt. So just I realize you guys are the user group that would be more inclined to do that. So we do have limited capacity currently, but we might switch to Azure or something a little faster down the track.
Yeah, I'm trying to while you've been talking, I've been just going, I'll just have a go and see if I can do what he's doing. I'm trying to upload all the Mulga data, since Jamie's sitting there with Mulga behind her. There's 1 million records on ALA and it's been going for about half an hour. Is there something wrong with my computer, or is that typical? Yeah,
no. So so we're hitting constraints in terms of being on the Nectar Research Cloud, which is good. It's the freely available, but we're not on Azure, we're not on AWS, and there's a price to pay for that. And I think you guys would run into that ceiling a lot more than some of our other user groups. So if you do log on and you find that ceiling, there's a feedback button on the right side. And if you go, hey, I hit my head on that ceiling, if we get enough of that from the community, we've got a better case to go, hey, let's get this on a bigger capacity server.
Nice.
Just finished. 20 minutes. That was good.
Cool.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.